The sterile white lights of the Nebu 9 interplanetary medical station buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the emergency operating theater. The year was 2387, and humanity had long since joined the vast tapestry of interstellar civilizations. Yet some wounds, both physical and emotional, remained as fresh as they had been decades ago. Captain Erin Hayes of the Interplanetary Naval Forces lay on the operating table, her breathing shallow and irregular. Blood seeped through her uniform, staining the once pristine blue fabric a deep crimson. Her mission had been simple: escort the peace delegation to the neutral zone and ensure their safety. No one had anticipated the attack, a desperate last stand by those who preferred war to reconciliation. "Her vitals are dropping," announced one of the human medical staff, their voice tight with concern. "We need to operate immediately." Dr. Tharkal, the Zalorian chief surgeon, stood motionless at the entrance to the operating theater. His seven-fingered hands remained clasped behind his back. His silver-flecked eyes narrowed as he observed the chaotic scene before him. The Zalorians were renowned throughout the galaxy for their medical expertise, their unique physiology allowing them to perform surgical procedures deemed impossible by other species. "Please," implored the human doctor, looking up from Erin's prone form. "We don't have the equipment or expertise to save her. Only you can perform this procedure." Tharkal's gill-like respiratory structures fluttered slightly, the only indication of any emotional response. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold and precise. "I will never save another human life again." The words fell like stones into the stunned silence of the operating theater. The human medical staff exchanged looks of disbelief and horror. "But you took an oath," protested one of them. "The Interplanetary Medical Code does not supersede my personal convictions," interrupted Tharkal. 27 years ago, human military forces destroyed my homeworld's southern continent. 3 million Zalorians died, including my entire family. His silver eyes flickered briefly to Erin's uniform. "I will not use my gifts to save those who wear the same insignia as the destroyers of my people." As if punctuating his declaration, Erin's body convulsed suddenly, a pained moan escaping her lips before she fell unconscious. The monitoring equipment began to emit a series of urgent beeps. "She's going into shock," cried one of the human doctors. "We're losing her." Tharkal turned away, his tall, slender form gliding toward the exit. "Find another surgeon," he said without looking back. "My decision is final." The doors hissed shut behind him, leaving the human medical team scrambling to stabilize their patient. Outside in the corridor, Tharkal paused, his shoulders slumping slightly as the rigid control he maintained in front of others momentarily faltered. The face of his wife flashed through his mind, followed by the memory of their home engulfed in flames. The humans called it collateral damage, as if such a term could encompass the devastation of an entire civilization. "You're letting her die, aren't you?" The soft voice came from behind him. Tharkal turned to find Mira, a young Zalorian nurse, watching him with evident disappointment. Unlike most of their kind, her skin bore the distinctive pale blue markings of the northern highlands, a region largely untouched by the human bombardment. "It is not your place to question my medical decisions," he replied stiffly. Mira stepped closer, her own silver eyes reflecting the harsh corridor lighting. "Is this a medical decision or a personal vendetta?" "The distinction is irrelevant." "It is entirely relevant," Mira insisted. "You are the only one on this station with the knowledge to perform the necessary procedure. Without you, she dies." Tharkal felt his inner eyelids contract in irritation. "Then she dies. One human life against 3 million Zalorians. The scales hardly seem balanced." So you would use your skills to perpetuate the same cycle of hatred that took your family? Mira's voice remained gentle, but the accusation struck Tharkal like a physical blow. Before he could formulate a response, the doors to the operating theater burst open, and one of the human doctors rushed out. "Dr. Tharkal, please," she begged. Captain Hayes was protecting the peace delegation. She took that blast shielding innocent civilians, including Zalorian diplomats. She's a peacemaker, not a destroyer. Tharkal felt the weight of both women's gazes upon him. For a moment, something inside him wavered, a faint echo of the healer he had once been, before grief and hatred had calcified around his heart. Then the memory of his burning home reasserted itself, and his resolve hardened once more. "And my answer remains the same," he said coldly and walked away. Behind him, Mira watched his retreating form with a mixture of sadness and determination. After a moment's hesitation, she turned to the human doctor. "I cannot perform the surgery," she said quietly, "but I can help in other ways. What medicines do you need?" "In the operating theater." Erin drifted in and out of consciousness. Pain lanced through her abdomen where the energy blade had pierced her side. The attack had been swift and unexpected, a lone assailant lunging from the crowd just as the delegation prepared to sign the peace accord. Erin had reacted instinctively, throwing herself between the attacker and the Zalorian ambassador. Strange, she thought hazily, how quickly priorities shifted in moments of crisis. She hadn't joined the interplanetary naval forces out of some noble desire to promote peace among the stars. It had been a practical decision: steady employment, good benefits, a chance to escape the overcrowded Earth and see something of the galaxy. Yet when the moment came, she had risked her life without hesitation. Perhaps there was more idealism buried within her than she had realized. Voices filtered through her semi-conscious state, urgent, worried, arguing about her fate. She tried to focus, to understand the words being exchanged, but the pain dragged her back into darkness. In that darkness, her father's face appeared. Dr. Richard Hayes, one of Earth's foremost trauma surgeons. What would he say if he could see her now? She had followed in his footsteps by choosing a life of service, even if her path had led her to military rather than medicine. "Dad," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her from hundreds of light years away. The darkness swallowed her once more. Tharkal sat alone in his quarters, staring unseeing at the digital reports floating in the holographic display before him. His refusal to operate on the human captain had caused quite a stir throughout the station. Already, he had received several messages from the administrative board, couched in diplomatic language but clearly questioning his decision. Let them question, he thought bitterly. Let them replace him if they dared. Few possessed his expertise in xenobiological systems, and none could match his record of successful interspecies surgeries. A soft chime announced a visitor at his door. Tharkal sighed, dismissing the holographic display with a wave of his hand. "Enter," he called, expecting another administrator come to persuade him to reconsider. Instead, the door slid open to reveal Ambassador Verlo, the senior diplomatic representative of the Interplanetary Alliance. The ambassador's species, Ludarian, resembled nothing so much as a collection of iridescent spheres held together by shifting magnetic fields. The translator device affixed to what might generously be called the ambassador's chest pulsed gently as he entered. "Dr. Tharkal." The ambassador's voice emerged from the translator, a pleasant, gender-neutral tone that betrayed none of the emotion that might lie beneath. "I hope I am not interrupting anything important." "Not at all, Ambassador," Tharkal replied, rising to his feet in a show of respect he did not entirely feel. "What brings you to my humble quarters?" Ambassador Verlo's spheres shifted slightly, a gesture that Tharkal had learned to interpret as thoughtful consideration. I believe you know why I am here. Doctor. Word of your reluctance to treat Captain Hayes has reached diplomatic circles. Reluctance suggests I might yet be persuaded, Tharkal said coldly. I assure you my decision is final. I see. The ambassador's spheres contracted slightly. Perhaps you would explain your reasoning to me. I understand there is some history between your people and humans, but surely... Some history? Tharkal felt his respiratory flaps flutter in agitation. Ambassador, with all due respect, that history involves the systematic destruction of my homeworld. 3 million of my people died in what the humans dismissively term the Zalorian incident, as if it were some minor diplomatic faux pas rather than genocide. The actions of a military junta 27 years ago. The ambassador pointed out gently. A regime that has since been overthrown and replaced by the very government Captain Hayes serves. A government that has repeatedly offered reparations and apologies for those actions. Apologies do not resurrect the dead, Tharkal replied bitterly. No, agreed the ambassador. They do not. But neither does refusing to save the life of someone who had no part in those events. Tharkal turned away, unwilling to let the ambassador see the conflict in his eyes. The human doctors can handle her care. They cannot, and you know it. The energy weapon that struck Captain Hayes was of Zalorian design. A cruel irony, given that she was protecting Zalorian diplomats at the time. The human doctors lack both the knowledge and equipment to counteract its specific effects. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken accusations and old griefs. I lost everyone, Ambassador, Tharkal said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. My wife, my parents, my daughter. Everyone I loved, gone in an instant of human miscalculation. I know. The ambassador's voice softened. And that loss is immeasurable. But consider this. Captain Hayes was willing to sacrifice her life to protect others, including your people. Does that not suggest that perhaps humans are capable of change? That perhaps this cycle of retribution might someday end? Tharkal did not respond. After a moment, Ambassador Verlo moved toward the door. I will not attempt to force your hand, Doctor. Your skills are your own to use or withhold as you see fit. But I ask you to consider what your refusal truly accomplishes, and whether it honors the memory of those you lost or merely perpetuates the hatred that took them from you. The door slid shut behind the ambassador, leaving Tharkal alone once more with his thoughts. In the medical supply room, Mira worked quickly, gathering the rare medications and specialized equipment that might help the human doctors stabilize Captain Hayes. She knew she was risking Tharkal's anger, perhaps even her position on the station. But she could not stand idly by while a patient died, regardless of their species. As she reached for a vial of synth plasma compatible with human physiology, the door to the supply room slid open. Mira froze, expecting to see Tharkal's disapproving face. Instead, a human doctor entered, the same one who had pleaded with Tharkal earlier. Oh, the human said, clearly surprised to find a Zalorian among the medical supplies. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You're not interrupting, Mira assured her, continuing to gather supplies. I was just collecting some items that might help Captain Hayes. Relief flooded the human's face. Thank you, I'm Dr. Chen, by the way. Sarah Chen. Mira, the Zalorian nurse replied simply. In truth, her full name was considerably longer and included several tonal inflections impossible for human vocal cords to reproduce. How is the captain? Dr. Chen's expression darkened. Not good. We've stabilized her for now, but the damage from the energy weapon is spreading, without specialized intervention. She trailed off, the implication clear. Mira nodded, placing the collected supplies into a medical transport case. I understand. I've included some Zalorian pharmaceuticals that might help slow the progression. They're not commonly used on humans, but I've adjusted the dosages based on comparative physiology. Dr. Chen stared at her in surprise. Won't you get in trouble? Dr. Tharkal made his position quite clear. A small, sad smile played across Mira's lips. Some things are more important than avoiding trouble. She hesitated, then added, Tharkal wasn't always like this. You know, before the bombardment, he was renowned for his compassion as much as his surgical skill. He treated all species without distinction or prejudice. What changed him? Dr. Chen asked softly. Loss, Mira replied simply. He lost everything in the attack. His family, his home, his faith in other species. All he had left was his skill, and he vowed never to use it to benefit those he held responsible for his suffering. Dr. Chen accepted the case of supplies with a grateful nod. I understand his pain, but this, letting an innocent person die, it won't bring his family back. No, agreed Mira. But grief rarely follows logical paths. She hesitated, then added, There's a communication terminal in the captain's room, yes? Perhaps if she could speak with someone she loves, it might strengthen her will to fight. A good suggestion, Dr. Chen said. Her father is a surgeon back on Earth. I'll arrange a call when she regains consciousness. As the human doctor turned to leave, Mira called after her. Dr. Chen, the Zalorian people are not all like Tharkal. Many of us believe in the peace process. Many of us want healing, not just of bodies, but of the divisions between our species. Dr. Chen smiled wearily. I believe that. I just hope Captain Hayes lives long enough to see that peace realized. As the door closed behind the human doctor, Mira leaned against the supply cabinet, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. She thought of Tharkal, the man who had taken her in after the bombardment, who had raised her as his own despite his grief, who had taught her everything she knew about medicine. The man who was now allowing hatred to override everything he had once held sacred. Oh, Tharkal, she whispered to the empty room. What would she think of what you've become? In her semi-conscious state, Erin was vaguely aware of movement around her. Voices speaking in urgent tones, hands touching her wounds, the sting of injections. The pain had receded somewhat, replaced by a worrying numbness that spread from her side throughout her body. Fragments of memory drifted through her mind, the flash of the energy blade, the ambassador's look of shock, the weight of her decision as she threw herself into the path of the attack. She hadn't hesitated, hadn't even thought about it, really. Just acted. Her father would understand that kind of instinct. How many times had she watched him work tirelessly to save patients that others had given up on? Every life is worth fighting for, he always said. Every single one. A new voice cut through her thoughts, familiar yet distorted, as if coming from very far away. Erin, can you hear me? With immense effort, she forced her eyes open. The world swam into blurry focus, revealing a holographic display floating above her bed. Her father's face looked out at her, lined with worry. Dad? Her voice was barely a whisper. Relief flooded his features. Yes, sweetheart, it's me. Dr. Chen called. She told me what happened. Erin tried to smile, though she wasn't sure if her facial muscles obeyed the command. Occupational hazard. Her father's expression grew serious. Erin, listen to me. You need to fight. The doctors there are doing everything they can, but you have to hold on. I'm trying, she murmured. But it hurts, Dad, and I'm so tired. I know, sweetheart. I know. His voice cracked slightly. But you're strong. Stronger than you know. Think about why you did this. Think about the peace mission. Think about all the lives that will be better because of what you and others like you are trying to accomplish. Erin felt tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. I didn't think I cared that much about the mission, she admitted. I thought it was just a job. Her father smiled gently. Actions speak louder than thoughts. Erin, you put yourself between danger and innocent people. That says more about who you are than any doubts you might have had. A wave of pain washed over her, and she grimaced, eyes squeezing shut. Erin, her father's voice grew urgent. Erin, stay with me. I'm here, she gasped when the pain subsided. Still here. Good girl. Now listen. Dr. Chen tells me there's a Zalorian surgeon on the station who could help you, but he's refusing because of historical grievances. Erin managed a weak laugh that turned into a cough. That's one way to put it. Is there anything you can tell me about him? Anything that might help persuade him? Erin tried to think through the fog that seemed to be filling her mind. His name is Tharkal. He's very respected, very skilled. But the humans, in the war. Her thoughts were becoming harder to organize, words slipping away before she could grasp them. I understand, sweetheart, her father said softly. Rest now. Save your strength. I'm going to talk to Dr. Chen again, see if there's anything else we can do. Dad, Erin fought to keep her eyes open. If this doesn't... Don't talk like that, he interrupted firmly. You're going to get through this. But if I don't, she insisted weakly. I want you to know, I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I tried to make a difference. Her father's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I'm proud of you, Erin, so proud. Now fight. Promise me you'll fight. I promise, she whispered as darkness began to close in again. Love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart, more than you'll ever know. The holographic display flickered and went dark as Erin slipped back into unconsciousness. Tharkal stood in the observation room, watching through the one-way glass as the human medical team worked frantically to stabilize Captain Hayes. He had not intended to come here, had, in fact, been on his way to file a formal complaint about Mira's unauthorized use of Zalorian medical supplies. Yet something had drawn him to this room, some impulse he couldn't quite name or understand. The human captain looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way that contradicted the uniform she wore, the uniform that represented everything Tharkal had lost. I thought I might find you here. He didn't turn at the sound of Mira's voice. I came to observe the human doctor's techniques for research purposes. Of course, Mira replied, and he could hear the skepticism in her tone. She moved to stand beside him, her eyes fixed on the scene beyond the glass. They're doing everything they can, but it won't be enough. The energy weapon was designed to disrupt cellular cohesion in a way human medicine cannot counteract. A design flaw in Zalorian weapons technology, Tharkal said stiffly. One I repeatedly pointed out during my time as a military consultant. A flaw that only you know how to counteract, Mira observed quietly. Tharkal's hands clenched at his sides. Do not attempt to manipulate me, Mira. My decision stands. I'm not trying to manipulate you, she protested. I'm trying to understand you. The Tharkal I know, the one who took in an orphan girl from the northern highlands, who taught her everything about medicine, who showed her what it meant to heal rather than harm. That Tharkal would never let a patient die out of spite. It is not spite, he snapped. It is justice. Justice! Mira turned to face him fully now, her silver eyes flashing. What justice is there in punishing someone for crimes they did not commit? Captain Hayes wasn't even born when the bombardment happened. She wears their uniform. She represents their military might. She was protecting Zilorian diplomats, Mira countered. She put her life at risk to save our people. Tharkal finally turned to face her, his expression tight with suppressed emotion. And where were such noble humans when our homes were burning? Where was their protective instinct when our children were dying? Mira didn't flinch from his anger. I don't know. I was only a child myself, orphaned by the same attack that took your family. But I know that you saved me. You, who had lost everything, still found room in your heart for compassion. Where is that compassion now? Tharkal. Dead, he said flatly. Buried with my wife and daughter. Mira's expression softened. No, it's still there. I see it every day in how you treat your patients, at least those who aren't human. In how you taught me, guided me, gave me a purpose when I had nothing. Your compassion isn't dead, Tharkal. It's just selective. Before he could respond, the door to the observation room slid open and Dr. Chen entered, her face drawn with exhaustion and worry. Dr. Tharkal, she said, her tone respectful despite the circumstances. I didn't expect to find you here. Professional curiosity, he replied coldly. Dr. Chen nodded, accepting the explanation without comment. I've just spoken with Captain Hayes' father. He asked me to convey a message to you. Tharkal's inner eyelids flickered in irritation. I have no interest in hearing pleas from human relatives. He's not pleading, Dr. Chen said quietly. He's a surgeon himself, one of Earth's best. He said he understands your position better than most, that if someone had taken his daughter from him, he might feel the same way you do. Despite himself, Tharkal felt a flicker of surprise. This was not the emotional appeal he had expected. He also said, Dr. Chen continued, that he hopes someday you'll find what he found, that healing others can sometimes help heal ourselves, that saving lives doesn't erase the pain of those we've lost, but it gives their memory meaning. The words struck uncomfortably close to thoughts Tharkal had once harbored himself. In the days after the bombardment when grief had threatened to consume him entirely. It had been Mira, tiny, frightened Mira, with no one left in the world, who had given him a reason to continue practicing medicine, to continue living at all. A lovely sentiment, he said dismissively, but it changes nothing. Dr. Chen sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. I understand. We'll continue doing what we can for Captain Hayes. She turned to go, then paused at the door. Oh, there was one more thing. Her father mentioned that before she lost consciousness again. Captain Hayes said something about being glad she tried to make a difference, that even if she didn't survive, she was at peace with her choice to protect others. The doctor departed, leaving Tharkal staring after her, an unexpected tightness in his chest. She reminds me of Lyra, Mira said softly beside him. Tharkal stiffened. Do not speak of her. Why not? She was my sister, or would have been, if you had been able to complete the adoption before the attack. Mira's voice grew gentler still. Lyra would have been about Captain Hayes' age now, and she would have made the same choice, I think, to protect others without hesitation, regardless of species. Enough, Mira, Tharkal warned, pain lancing through him at the mention of his lost daughter. I've respected your grief for years, Mira continued undeterred. I've watched you pull away from everything that once defined you, your compassion, your belief in the healing arts as a universal good. I've watched you nurture your hatred as if it were precious, feeding it with every slight, real or imagined, that humans have committed against our kind. You know nothing of what I've endured, he hissed. I know exactly what you've endured, she countered, her own voice rising slightly. I endured it too. I lost my parents, my home, my future, everything except you. You became my family, Tharkal, but lately, I hardly recognize you." Through the glass, they could see the human medical team rushing around Captain Hayes's bed, their movements growing more urgent. An alarm began to sound, the distinctive tone indicating a critical drop in vital signs. "Hey, she's dying," Mira said quietly, "and you are the only one who can save her." Tharkal remained silent, his eyes fixed on the human captain's pale face. "What would Lyra think of her adoptive father now?" Mira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What would your wife say if she could see the healer she loved transformed into someone who would let a patient die out of hatred?" Something broke inside Tharkal then, some wall he had built around his heart over long years of grief and anger. Images flashed through his mind, his wife's smile as she proudly watched him receive the Interplanetary Medical Award. Lyra's eager questions as she followed him on his rounds, already showing signs of following in his footsteps. The countless patients of all species whose lives he had saved. And then, unbidden, came the memory of the day he had found Mira, a tiny, terrified Zalorian child hiding in the ruins of what had once been the Northern Highlands' most prestigious medical academy. Her parents, both respected physicians, had been attending a conference there when the bombs fell. She had survived only because she had wandered away to explore the academy's famous gardens. He had taken her in without hesitation, this orphaned child of his people, had raised her alongside Lyra, taught them both the principles of medicine, of healing, of compassion that transcended species. When had he forgotten those principles? When had his grief turned to this bitter, consuming hatred? The alarm from the operating room grew more insistent. Through the glass, Tharkal could see Dr. Chen performing emergency procedures, her movements growing increasingly desperate as Captain Hayes's life slipped away. "Tharkal," Mira pleaded, "and if not for her, then for Lyra, for the healer you once were, for all you taught me about what medicine truly means." For a long moment, Tharkal stood frozen, caught between the past he could not change and the present moment in which he still had a choice. Then, without a word, he turned and strode toward the door. Aaron floated in a strange, peaceful darkness. The pain had receded, replaced by a gentle numbness that seemed to cradle her like a mother's arms. Was this death? It wasn't so bad, really. At least the pain was gone. Distantly, she could hear voices, urgent, worried, then suddenly hopeful. A new presence entered her awareness, a cool, authoritative voice issuing commands in a language she didn't recognize. Something sharp pierced her side, sending a jolt of pain through the peaceful numbness. Aaron wanted to protest, to tell them to let her rest, but no words would come. Another sharp pain, then another. The darkness began to recede, replaced by harsh light and increased awareness of her body, and with it, agony. "Her cellular structure is beginning to restabilize," someone said. "The counter-agent is working." "Continue monitoring her autonomic responses," replied the cool voice. "Prepare the neural regenerator for the secondary procedure." Aaron forced her eyes open, blinking against the bright lights of the operating theater. Through the haze of pain and medication, she could make out a tall, slender figure looming over her, silver eyes regarding her with clinical detachment. "Dr. Tharkal," she whispered, recognizing the Zalorian surgeon from station briefings. The alien doctor paused in his work, those silver eyes meeting hers directly for the first time. "You should not be conscious," he said, his tone neutral. "Sorry to disappoint." Aaron managed a ghost of a smile touching her lips despite the pain. Something flickered across the Zalorian's face, surprise, perhaps, or reluctant admiration for her tenacity. "You humans are remarkably resilient," he observed, adjusting something on the medical equipment above her. Most species would have succumbed to their injuries long before now. Stubborn, Aaron corrected weakly. Dad always says I'm too stubborn for my own good. Your father, Tharkal said slowly, the surgeon. Aaron nodded slightly, the movement sending fresh waves of pain through her body. Taught me everything important, like never give up on a patient. The Zilorian's hands stilled for a moment. A wise principle, he said quietly. One I myself once held dear. Why did you? Aaron began, but a sudden spasm of pain cut off her words, her body arching involuntarily against the restraints holding her to the operating table. Do not attempt to speak, Tharkal instructed, his professional demeanor reasserting itself. The cellular reconstruction process is painful but necessary. We will administer additional analgesics once your vital systems have stabilized. Through the haze of pain, Aaron caught sight of another Zilorian female, judging by the more delicate respiratory structures watching from nearby. Her expression a mixture of relief and something like pride. Ymira, Tharkal called to the female Zilorian. Prepare the secondary neural stabilizers. We will need to proceed quickly once the primary treatment takes effect. As the female Zilorian, Mira, moved to comply, Aaron felt darkness beginning to close in again. This time, however, it was not the peaceful darkness of near death, but the healing darkness of medically induced sleep. Before consciousness slipped away entirely, she heard Tharkal's voice once more. Rest now. Captain Hayes, your fight is not yet over, but you will not face it alone. Tharkal worked tirelessly, his 7-fingered hands moving with the precision and confidence that had made him legendary throughout the interplanetary medical community. The procedure was complex, doubly so because human physiology responded differently to the energy weapon's effects than Zilorian physiology did. Yet, as he worked, he felt something awakening within him that had long been dormant, the pure satisfaction of healing, unmarred by thoughts of species or politics or past grievances. This was what had drawn him to medicine all those years ago. The simple, profound act of mending what was broken. A neural pathways stabilizing, Mira reported, monitoring the complex array of equipment surrounding the operating table. Cellular cohesion at 67% and rising. Tharkal nodded, not looking up from his work. Excellent. Increase the molecular binding agent by 12 units and prepare for the final phase of reconstruction. As Mira adjusted the equipment settings, Dr. Chen approached cautiously from the other side of the operating table. Thank you, she said simply, for changing your mind. Tharkal did not immediately respond, focusing instead on the delicate procedure before him. Only when he had completed the current phase did he look up, meeting the human doctor's gaze. I did not change my mind, he said quietly. I remembered it. There is a difference. Dr. Chen smiled tiredly. Whatever you call it, you've saved her life. That counts for something? It counts for precisely one life, Tharkal replied, though without the bitterness that would have colored such a statement hours before. Against 3 million lost. Every journey begins with a single step, Dr. Chen offered. Every healing process starts with a single cell regenerating. To his own surprise, Tharkal found himself appreciating the human's perspective. A poetic viewpoint, if somewhat simplified. Most human wisdom is, Dr. Chen admitted with a small shrug. We're not as long-lived as Zilorians. We don't have centuries to develop nuanced philosophical treatises. We need our wisdom in digestible chunks. Despite himself, Tharkal felt the corners of his mouth twitch upward, the closest he had come to a smile in many years. An interesting perspective. Perhaps there is something to be said for directness. The moment was interrupted by a soft beep from the monitoring equipment. a positive tone indicating successful completion of the current treatment phase. "Final stage ready to commence," Mira announced, her silver eyes bright with barely contained emotion as she looked at Tharkal. He nodded, refocusing on the task at hand. "Let us proceed." The operation continued for several more hours. The team working in focused silence, broken only by occasional technical exchanges. Throughout it all, Tharkal maintained his composure, his movements precise and deliberate. Yet inwardly, he felt as though some great weight was shifting, not disappearing entirely, but perhaps becoming more bearable. When at last the final sutures were applied and Captain Hayes was moved to the recovery unit, Tharkal found himself standing alone in the now quiet operating theater, staring at his hands as if seeing them for the first time in years. These hands had saved countless lives before the bombardment. These hands had pulled Mira from the rubble of the Northern Highlands Medical Academy. These hands had, just now, saved the life of a human soldier, a representative of the very military that had taken everything from him. And yet, he felt no regret for that last action, only a quiet, surprising peace. Tharkal. He looked up to find Mira standing in the doorway, her expression cautiously hopeful. "The captain is stable," she reported. "All signs indicate a full recovery, given time and proper care." Tharkal nodded, unsurprised. Despite the complexity of the procedure, he had known it would succeed. His hands had not forgotten their purpose, even if his heart temporarily had. "You should rest," Mira continued, stepping fully into the room. "You've been operating for over 6 hours. I will soon." Tharkal turned his gaze back to his hands. "I have been thinking." Mira moved closer, her head tilted slightly in curiosity. "About what?" "About what you said earlier. About what I taught you regarding medicine, and how far I have strayed from those teachings." He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "About Lyra, and what she would think of me now." Mira's expression softened. "I shouldn't have used her memory that way. It was unfair." "No." Tharkal shook his head slowly. "It was necessary. I had lost my way, forgotten who I was meant to be." "And who is that?" Mira asked gently. "A healer," Tharkal replied simply. "Not a judge, not an executioner, not a vessel for hatred, just a healer." Mira smiled, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "She would be proud of you. So would your wife." Tharkal felt his respiratory flaps flutter with emotion. "Perhaps. Though I have much to atone for. Years of allowing hatred to override my oath, of seeing uniform instead of patient, of dishonoring their memory rather than preserving it." "It's not too late," Mira assured him, reaching out to touch his arm lightly, a gesture of familiarity she had not attempted in years. "You've taken the first step today." Tharkal looked down at her hand on his arm, then back to her face. So different from Lyra's, and yet carrying something of the same spirit that had made his daughter special. "Why did you stay with me all these years?" he asked suddenly. "Watching me become this bitter, hateful creature, why didn't you leave? Seek training elsewhere with someone who still honored the principles of healing?" Mira's smile turned sad. "Because you're my family. Tharkal. The only family I have left. And because I always believed the real you, the healer who saved me, who taught me what compassion truly means, was still in there somewhere, beneath all that pain." Tharkal felt something within him break and heal simultaneously, like a bone that must be reset before it can mend properly. "Thank you," he said softly, "and for not giving up on me." Before Mira could respond, a gentle chime sounded, indicating someone at the operating theater door. "Enter," Tharkal called, composing himself quickly. The door slid open to reveal Ambassador Verlo. the Ludarian spheres arranged in what Tharkal recognized as their configuration for formal occasions. Dr. Tharkal, the ambassador's translator intoned, I have just been informed of your successful operation on Captain Hayes. The Interplanetary Alliance extends its deepest gratitude for your intervention. Tharkal inclined his head slightly. I was merely fulfilling my medical oath, Ambassador, nothing more. We both know it was considerably more than that, the ambassador replied, their spheres shifting in a pattern that suggested knowing amusement. Nevertheless, your actions today may have salvaged more than one life. Meaning? Tharkal asked. The peace process between humans and Zalorians has been precarious at best. Captain Hayes' sacrifice to protect the Zalorian delegation was a powerful symbol of human commitment to that process. Had she died under Zalorian care? Particularly after your initial refusal to treat her, it could have set relations back by decades. Tharkal felt a chill at the thought. That was not my intention. I know, the ambassador assured him. Just as I know that your eventual decision to save her was not politically motivated, that makes it all the more meaningful. The Ludarian spheres contracted slightly. The Alliance is preparing to finalize new accords regarding interspecies medical care and patient rights. In light of today's events, we would be honored if you would consider joining the committee overseeing this process. Tharkal blinked in surprise. Me? I am hardly the most diplomatic choice. On the contrary, Ambassador Verlo countered. Your unique perspective, having experienced both the deepest tragedy of interspecies conflict and now taken a step toward healing, makes you ideally suited to help shape these accords. We need voices that understand the real cost of hatred as well as the power of moving beyond it. Tharkal glanced at Mira, who was watching him with unconcealed hope in her silver eyes. I will consider it, he said finally. Excellent. The ambassador's spheres brightened perceptibly. I look forward to your decision. Now, I believe you both have earned some rest after your remarkable efforts today. As the ambassador departed, Tharkal turned back to Mira. Do you think I should accept? He asked, genuinely curious about her opinion. I think, she replied carefully, that the healer I know would see this as an opportunity to ensure that what happened to our people never happens to anyone else, to use his skills and experience to protect all patients, regardless of species or history. Tharkal nodded slowly. And that healer, you believe he still exists? Mira smiled, the expression transforming her face. I know he does. I saw him today in the operating theater, saving a life that many would have considered enemy. I've always seen him. Tharkal, even when you couldn't see yourself, for the first time in 27 years. Tharkal felt the weight of hatred begin to lift from his shoulders, not disappearing entirely, for such deep wounds never fully heal, but perhaps beginning to scar over at last. Come, he said gently, to let us check on our patient before we rest. 3 days later, Erin Hayes opened her eyes to find sunlight streaming through the large viewport of her recovery room. For a moment, she was disoriented. The last thing she remembered clearly was the operating theater. Pain, and the silver eyes of the Zalorian surgeon looking down at her. Good morning, Captain. Erin turned her head slowly to find Mira sitting beside her bed, monitoring her vital signs. How long? Erin's voice was rough from disuse. 3 days, Mira replied, offering her a small cup of water. The procedure was successful, but your body needed time to recover from both the injury and the treatment. Erin sipped the water gratefully, feeling it soothe her parched throat. Dr. Tharkal, she said after a moment. He operated on me. Mira nodded, a small smile playing across her lips. Yes, Against his initial judgment, I might add. Why? Aaron asked. What changed his mind? Before Mira could respond, the door to the recovery room slid open, and Tharkal himself entered. The Zalorian surgeon looked different somehow, still formal and dignified, but with a subtle shift in his bearing that Aaron couldn't quite define. Ah, Captain Hayes, you are awake. Tharkal approached the bed, examining the monitoring equipment with a critical eye. Your recovery is proceeding as expected. The cellular regeneration is nearly complete, though you will need to remain under observation for another 48 hours. Thank you, Aaron said simply, for saving my life. Tharkal's silver eyes met hers, and in them, she saw something unexpected. Not warmth, exactly, but perhaps the absence of the cold hatred she had glimpsed in the operating theater. You are welcome, he replied with equal simplicity. May I ask what changed your mind? Aaron pressed gently. I was told you initially refused to treat me. Tharkal was silent for a long moment, his gaze shifting to the viewport and the stars beyond. You said something, he finally responded, so before you lost consciousness in the operating theater. So do you remember? Aaron frowned, trying to recall through the haze of pain and medication. I'm not sure. Everything from that time is fragmented. You asked me why I had changed my mind about treating you. Tharkal continued. And then you said, do it for her. Aaron's frown deepened. For her? I don't remember that. Who was I talking about? Tharkal glanced at Mira, a complex emotion passing between them. That, he said quietly, is what changed everything. I believed you were referring to Mira, whom I raised after the bombardment that took my family. But later, I realized you couldn't have known that connection. I didn't, Aaron confirmed, confused. I barely remember being in the operating theater at all. Precisely, Tharkal nodded, which means those words, do it for her, were not a calculated appeal to my personal history. They were something else entirely. What? Aaron asked. A reminder, Tharkal replied simply, of what medicine truly means, of why I became a healer in the first place, of the daughter I lost and the one I found. His gaze shifted briefly to Mira before returning to Aaron. You could not have known the significance those words would hold for me, yet they were exactly what I needed to hear at that moment. Aaron shook her head slightly, still confused. I wish I could take credit for some profound insight, but honestly, I don't even remember saying it. Sometimes, Mira interjected gently. The most powerful words are those we speak without calculation or agenda, the ones that come from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. Tharkal nodded in agreement. Indeed, whatever prompted those words, Captain Hayes, they succeeded where all logical arguments had failed. They reminded me that beneath uniform and species and history, we are all simply living beings worthy of care. Aaron felt a lump forming in her throat. I'm glad, she said softly. Though I still don't understand why those particular words affected you so deeply. Tharkal was quiet for a moment, his respiratory flaps fluttering slightly in what Aaron had come to recognize as a sign of emotional processing. My daughter, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. My biological daughter, Lyra. She was killed in the human bombardment 27 years ago, along with my wife and the rest of my family. Afterward, I found Mira, orphaned by the same attack, and raised her as my own. I'm so sorry, Aaron said, the words feeling woefully inadequate against the weight of such loss. For many years, Tharkal continued, I allowed my grief to transform into hatred, specifically hatred for humans and the military you represent. I refused to treat human patients. I withdrew from interspecies medical initiatives. I'd lost sight of what healing truly means. And my words reminded you? Aaron asked gently. They created a moment of clarity, Tharkal explained. A realization that in dishonoring my oath as a healer, I was also dishonoring Lyra's memory. She would have wanted me to heal, not hate, to save lives, not permit them to be lost out of bitterness. Aaron felt tears gathering in her eyes. I'm glad, then, that something good could come from all this. As am I, Tharkal agreed, his tone softening further. Though I regret that it took your near death to prompt this realization. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the soft beeping of the monitoring equipment. Dr. Tharkal has agreed to join the Interplanetary Medical Ethics Committee, Mira said after a moment, obvious pride in her voice. To help establish new protocols for interspecies medical care. That's wonderful, Aaron said sincerely. Your expertise will be invaluable. Perhaps, Tharkal acknowledged, though I suspect I have as much to learn as to teach in this new role. He adjusted something on the monitoring equipment, then stepped back from the bed. You should rest now. Captain Hayes, your body is still healing. As he turned to leave, Aaron called after him. Dr. Tharkal. The Zalorian paused, looking back at her with a questioning tilt to his head. Thank you, she said again, this time with deeper meaning. Not just for saving my life, but for finding your way back, from one healer's child to another. I think both our parents would be proud. Something that might almost have been a smile flickered across Tharkal's face. Rest well, Captain Hayes. We will speak again before you are discharged. After he had gone, Aaron turned to Mira. He's different than I expected. He's different than he was a few days ago, Mira replied softly. More like the Tharkal I remember from my childhood, the one who taught me that healing transcends all boundaries of species or politics. Will it last? Aaron asked. Will this change in him? Mira smiled, her silver eyes bright with hope. I believe it will. The hatred he carried, it was never truly who he was, just a shell he built around himself to contain his grief. She glanced toward the door through which Tharkal had departed. Now that the shell has cracked, I think the real healer can finally emerge again. 2 weeks later. Aaron stood on the observation deck of Nebu 9, gazing out at the stars. Her side still ached where the energy blade had struck, but Dr. Tharkal's remarkable surgical skills had ensured a recovery far swifter than anyone had anticipated. Beautiful, isn't it? Aaron turned to find Mira approaching, the Zalorian's slender form silhouetted against the soft lighting of the deck. Breathtaking, Aaron agreed, turning back to the viewport. Though I've been in space for years now, I never get tired of the view. Nor do I, Mira said, coming to stand beside her. Tharkal says it reminds us of our true size in the universe, humbling but also comforting. No matter how significant our troubles seem, the stars continue their ancient patterns, unchanged by our brief sorrows. Aaron smiled. That sounds like something my father would say. He always had a poetic streak beneath all that medical precision. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching as a distant ship engaged its FTL drive, vanishing in a flash of light. I wanted to thank you, Aaron said finally, for what you did when Tharkal initially refused to treat me. Dr. Chen told me you risked your position to provide medications that helped keep me alive. Mira's respiratory flaps fluttered in what Aaron had come to recognize as the Zalorian equivalent of a dismissive shrug. I did what any medical professional would do. Not any, Aaron corrected gently. Many would have followed Tharkal's lead, especially given the history between our species. Perhaps, Mira acknowledged. But I was raised by a healer who taught me that medicine transcends such boundaries, even if he temporarily forgot that lesson himself. Aaron smiled. He's fortunate to have you to remind him. We remind each other, Mira replied. That is what family does. The mention of family brought Aaron's thoughts back to her father. They had spoken several times during her recovery, his relief at her survival evident in every word. She had told him about Tharkal's change of heart, about the whispered words that had somehow broken through decades of hatred. I've been meaning to ask, Aaron said after a moment. Those words I supposedly said in the operating theater, do it for her. Are you certain that's what I said? I still have no memory of it. Mira's silver eyes met hers, a curious expression crossing her face. Tharkal is certain, and it would explain his sudden change of heart. It's just, Aaron frowned slightly. It doesn't sound like something I would say, even in a semi-conscious state. It's too, I don't know, melodramatic? Mira laughed, the sound musical and light. Perhaps your subconscious has a flair for the dramatic that your waking self does not. Perhaps, Aaron agreed, though she remained puzzled by the discrepancy. Does it matter? Mira asked gently. Whether you said those exact words or not, the outcome remains the same. Tharkal found his way back to the healer he once was. You survived. The peace process continues. Aaron considered this, then shook her head with a smile. You're right. The specifics aren't important. The healing is what matters, both mine and his. A comfortable silence fell between them again, broken only when Aaron's communication device chimed softly. That will be your transport notification, Mira observed. I believe you're scheduled to depart within the hour. Aaron nodded, feeling a twinge of regret. Back to duty, though not active duty for another few weeks, according to Dr. Tharkal's orders. He is nothing if not thorough in his medical directives, Mira said with a small smile. He has already prepared a detailed recovery plan for your medical team to follow upon your return to Earth. I expected nothing less, Aaron replied, returning the smile. Will you tell him goodbye for me? And thank him again? You can tell him yourself, Mira said, nodding toward the entrance to the observation deck. He's coming now. Aaron turned to see Tharkal approaching, his tall form moving with the fluid grace characteristic of his species. He wore formal medical attire, a sign that he had likely been attending to official duties. Captain Hayes, he greeted her with a slight incline of his head. I trust you are prepared for your departure? As ready as I'll ever be, Aaron replied. Though I admit I've grown somewhat fond of Nebu 9 during my recovery, the station tends to have that effect on people. Tharkal observed. Perhaps because it represents a rare point of true cooperation among species, a place where differences are acknowledged, but not allowed to override our common needs and aspirations. Aaron nodded, struck by the change in Tharkal's perspective since their first encounter. A model for what could be possible on a larger scale. Perhaps, Tharkal agreed. Though such change requires both individual and collective willingness to move beyond historical grievances. His silver eyes met hers directly. Something I am still learning to do. As are we all, Aaron said softly. Tharkal reached into a pocket of his formal attire and withdrew a small device, which he offered to Aaron. Your complete medical records, including detailed notes on the procedure and recommended follow-up care. He explained. I have already transmitted copies to your medical team on Earth, but I thought you might wish to have your own version. Thank you, Aaron said, accepting the device. For everything. Tharkal inclined his head again, a gesture of acknowledgement and respect. I have also included my direct contact information, Should you or your medical team have any questions during your recovery? Aaron raised an eyebrow in surprise. That's unusually generous. Consider it part of my atonement, Tharkal said quietly. For nearly allowing personal grievance to override medical duty, there's nothing to atone for, Aaron assured him. You made the right choice in the end. That's what matters. Tharkal was silent for a moment, his gaze shifting to the stars beyond the viewport. I have been writing, he said finally. A memoir of sorts, documenting my experiences during and after the bombardment, including my journey back to the principles I once held dear. That sounds like an important project, Aaron said sincerely. It has been therapeutic, Tharkal admitted, and perhaps someday it may help others who find themselves lost in hatred as I was. He turned back to her, his expression solemn. I have titled it For Her, in honor of both the daughter I lost and the words that reminded me of who I was meant to be. Aaron felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. I'm honored, she said softly, though I still don't remember saying those words. Whether you spoke them or not, Tharkal replied. They represent the truth that changed everything for me. That healing, both giving and receiving it, is how we honor those we have lost. Aaron's communication device chimed again, more insistently this time. You should go, Mira said gently. Your transport will not wait. Aaron nodded, suddenly reluctant to leave these two individuals who had become so unexpectedly significant in her life. I hope we'll meet again, she said, looking between Tharkal and Mira. I believe we will, Tharkal replied. The universe has a way of bringing together those whose paths are meant to intersect. Impulsively, Aaron stepped forward and embraced Mira, who returned the gesture after a moment of surprise. Then, more hesitantly, she extended her hand to Tharkal. The Zalorian surgeon regarded the offered hand for a heartbeat, then reached out and clasped it firmly in his own seven-fingered grip. Safe travels, Captain Hayes, he said formally, and may you continue to make a difference, as you intended. As Aaron turned to leave, she caught a final glimpse of the two Zalorians standing together against the backdrop of stars. Healer and student, father and daughter, bound by loss and love and the shared commitment to mending what was broken. In that moment, she understood that some wounds, even those inflicted by hatred and war, could indeed be healed, if only one was brave enough to whisper the right words and wise enough to hear them. Some weeks later, in his private quarters on Nebu 9, Tharkal sat at his desk, reviewing the latest draft of his memoir. The words flowed more easily now than when he had begun, as if the act of recording his journey was itself part of the healing process. A soft chime announced a visitor at his door. Enter, he called, setting aside the holographic display. The door slid open to reveal Mira, her expression unusually excited. Tharkal, have you seen the news? I have been writing all morning, he replied. What news? Mira stepped into the room, activating the main information display with a gesture. The Zalorian Reconstruction Initiative has been approved. Funding from 17 different species, including humans, to begin restoring the southern continent. Tharkal stared at the display in disbelief as images of his devastated homeland appeared, followed by architectural renderings of proposed rebuilding projects. This is unexpected, he said softly. There's more, Mira continued eagerly. The first phase includes rebuilding the Central Medical Academy, with an expanded focus on interspecies medicine and trauma care. She paused, watching his reaction carefully. They want you to head the trauma surgery department. Tharkal felt his respiratory flaps flutter rapidly as emotion threatened to overwhelm him. Me? But I have been away for so long. Who better? Mira asked simply. Someone who understands both the physical and emotional aspects of healing from trauma? Someone who has experienced loss firsthand, yet found his way back to compassion? Tharkal rose from his desk, moving to stand before the display. The images shifted to show the proposed site of the new medical academy, built upon the very grounds where his family home had once stood. "I don't know if I can return there," he admitted. "The memories will always be painful," Mira acknowledged gently. "But perhaps it is time to create new memories alongside the old ones. To honor those we lost by building something that will help others heal." Tharkal turned to look at her, this child who had become his daughter in all the ways that truly mattered. "You would come with me?" "Of course," Mira replied without hesitation. "We are family, are we not?" Family. The word resonated within him, carrying echoes of both pain and possibility. For so long, he had defined himself by what he had lost. Perhaps now it was time to define himself by what remained and what might yet be built. "I will consider it," he said finally. Mira smiled, knowing that for Tharkal, such a response was tantamount to acceptance. "There is one more thing," she added, her tone softening. "A message from Earth. From Captain Hayes." Tharkal blinked in surprise. "She has contacted us?" Mira nodded, activating a separate channel on the display. Aaron Hayes' face appeared, her expression warm and her color much improved since Tharkal had last seen her. "Dr. Tharkal, Mira," she began. "I hope this message finds you both well. My recovery continues according to your excellent treatment plan, and my doctors here are frankly amazed at how quickly I've healed." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "I'm contacting you because I've been assigned to the security detail for the Zalorian Reconstruction Initiative. It seems my unique experience with Zalorian medical practices makes me an ideal candidate." A smile touched her lips. "In other words, I may be seeing you both again sooner than any of us anticipated." Tharkal felt something shift within him, a sensation he eventually recognized as hope. "I wanted you to know," Aaron continued, "that my father has volunteered his services to the medical training program associated with the initiative. He says he's long wanted to learn more about Zalorian surgical techniques, and this seems like the perfect opportunity." Her smile widened. "So it seems our paths will continue to intersect, as you predicted. Dr. Tharkal, I look forward to it." She paused again, then added softly, "Until then, remember that what you do matters. Every life you save, every student you teach, every word you write, it all matters. For her, for him, for all of us." The message ended, leaving Tharkal staring at the display in silent contemplation. "Well," Mira prompted after a moment, "what do you think?" Tharkal turned to look at her, then back at the images of his homeland, devastated by war but now poised for rebirth. "I think," he said slowly, "that it is time to go home, to build something new from the ashes of the old, to heal not just individual patients, but perhaps, in some small way, the rift between our peoples." Mira's silver eyes shimmered with emotion. "For her?" she asked softly. Tharkal nodded, finally allowing himself to speak his daughter's name aloud after so many years of painful silence. "For Lyra," he said, "and for you, and for all those who need healing in this broken, beautiful universe of ours." Outside the viewport of his quarters, the stars continued their ancient patterns, unchanged by the brief sorrows of those who observed them. Yet within those observations, within the connections forged across species and grief and time, perhaps lay the seeds of something truly transcendent, a whispered reminder that even the deepest wounds could heal, if only one was brave enough to try.